Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Mercy of the God of War. Episode 12. Let me go. Let me go. You can't hurt me. You can't hurt me. Fetra, will you stop screaming like this? It's extremely disagreeable to my ears, said the Emperor, annoyed. Karen claims you threatened his concubine. What happened? Her servant insulted me. Father. That dirty servant insulted me, and the slave concubine attacked me. Who attacked who? Said Karen, frowning. Fetra, you lying little snake. Didn't you draw a sword in the presence of a dragon's son? Fetra ignored her, still screaming, begging to get her father's attention and for him to take pity on her. Father, they disfigured me. Look what that witch did to my body. Father, you must have justice for me. Indeed, the shawl had slid down with Karen holding her in the air, and now, everyone could see the large red rashes on her skin. Karen sneered, visibly satisfied. What is that? Said the Emperor, lost. An allergic reaction, I believe, Your Highness, sighed Cassandra. I did throw some dirty water on Princess Fetra. Why would you do that? Karen, dearest, what was that about a sword? Princess Fetra came to my medicinal garden earlier, Your Highness, explained Cassandra, stepping forward. She acted recklessly, and I got scared. My servant tried to defend me, but Princess Fetra took out a sword to attack me. I reacted and threw, some water on her, which certainly caused her current condition. The Emperor took a minute to take it all in, but meanwhile, Fetra started screaming again. Her servant attacked me. She insulted me. I want her head, Father. Father, you can't let me be insulted like this. I am an imperial princess. Cray growled, and it was obvious the dragon was trying to get to her. It only made her panic and scream even more. Father! Father! He will kill me! Brother! Brother, help me! However, Vrihan remained silent, ignoring her as if this situation was completely unrelated to him. Cassandra hated that he was abandoning his sister in such a situation. As she kept screaming, Karen suddenly tightened his grip, choking her a bit. He wasn't suffocating her, but at least she had to stop screaming if she wanted to breathe. Truth was, Cassandra hated seeing a woman mistreated like this, but Fetra had gone over a limit this time. The Emperor shook his head. Karen, son, enough. I don't want you killing your siblings in the middle of my imperial chamber. She insulted and assaulted Cassandra, hissed the war god. I will not let this go. Calm down, will you? Cassandra is fine, isn't she? She's just. Since when do you know anything about pregnant women, you old man? Roared Karen, making the Emperor jump. Fine? Do you know how fragile she is at the moment? What if she had lost her child? What if Fetra had injured her? Calm down, dearie, I will handle this. But first, Karen, let her go, please, son. Karen, said Cassandra, gently. She was afraid things could go wrong if he ignored the Emperor's orders any longer, and killed Fetra in such a place. Karen opened his hand all of a sudden, and Fetra fell to the floor brutally. A crack sound was heard, announcing nothing good. She started screaming in pain, again, but now holding her injured ankle. The war god suddenly grabbed her wrist, forcefully dragging her and throwing her to his father's feet. The emperor sighed, his hands on his hips. Fetra, you unruly child! You never listen, do you? I guess I have been too lenient with you. Attacking a pregnant imperial concubine. How could you be such a foolish? They are the ones you should punish, father, she sobbed, trying to act pitiful, pulling on his clothing. They made me like this. You can't allow a servant to treat me like this. Enough. Enough of you, Fetra. You really need a lesson. Guards. Imperial guards appeared all of a sudden, but none of them actually dared to approach Fetra and the furious war god next to her. Take her to the imperial prison for her to stay. MH. 50 days. The prisoner's treatment. Yes, 50 days sounds like enough time for me to find her a husband. Husband. Yes. You've annoyed me enough. Time to send you away, you can marry some scholar or whatever. You'll be stripped of your title as an imperial princess, too. I've had enough of you stirring trouble. Father. You can't do that. I was born an imperial princess, I'll die an imperial princess. Looks like you just expired your first life, Fetra, sneered Sherian, satisfied. Brother, if I remember correctly, the imperial prison is this way. She was pointing a finger, and a second later, Cassandra understood what she meant. He was going to. Karen grabbed Fetra once again and, despite how much she screamed, hysterical, he suddenly threw her out of the window Sherian had shown. Cassandra and her servants were shocked, covering their mouths in horror. Don't worry, dear, said Karine. It's only 2 or 3 floors down until she lands on the building. Landing wasn't exactly the right word. Karine and Sherian were almost smiling as if Fetra's screams had been some pleasant melody. Cassandra couldn't help but feel a bit bad for her on the inside. From the way she was piercing their ears, she must have been in such horrible pain. The emperor's mouth was still open, as he was still processing what had just happened, staring at the window. He finally turned to Karen, angry. Karen, when I ordered for Fetra to be taken to the imperial prison, I actually meant for her to be taken there through the door, he exclaimed. Why is it that you children are always only thinking of fighting and killing each other? His yelling had no effect on his son. Karen turned around and walked back to Cassandra, looking almost satisfied. At least, the murderous look in his eyes was gone. Well, from what we can hear, father, said Sherian. She is still pretty much alive. The emperor glared her way, not amused by her antics this time. He sighed, massaging his temples and looking truly exhausted by all this ruckus. Anyway, someone go grab her from wherever she is now, and get her an imperial physician immediately. She's still going to the imperial prison. Now I have to find someone who'll be willing to marry this pest. Ah, what a headache! Those children! While the poor emperor kept rambling, the guards subtly glanced Cassandra's way for a second, but after thinking about it twice, figured it would probably be better to find another imperial physician. With the current state of things, the imperial concubine probably wouldn't even have agreed to treat the princess rashes. Once the guards had left, Cassandra let out a little sigh of relief. Things weren't over, though. Vrihan turned to their father, looking very serious. "Father, we still have an issue to solve." "What? What now?" When his eyes surreptitiously went Miss Sandra's way, Cassandra's heart sank. She knew this wasn't good. She had thought that man had been too cold, watching his sister being thrown out of a window without saying a thing, but now, it was clear he had been waiting for this moment all along. Not caring about Fetra, just this moment. The servant. She still insulted an imperial princess. "She did it to defend me," said Cassandra, immediately standing in front of her sister in a protective stance. "The imperial law does not care about the reasons for her actions," hissed Vrihan. "No servant, slave, or anyone else outside the imperial family can be forgiven for insulting an imperial family member. Isn't that right, Father?" The emperor sighed, visibly annoyed by the situation. He knew the law, of course, but he could tell that the servant had only acted to protect the young concubine. "Whatever," he said. "Bring this servant forth." "Your Highness, please," claimed Cassandra. "She isn't an imperial servant, she is my family." It was her last resort. Maybe, if Miss Andra couldn't be considered as part of the staff in the imperial palace, the emperor would forget about punishing her. However, she could see Karine frowning, and that didn't announce anything good. "What is that now? Your family, my dear white lily? How so?" Miss Andra, trembling, stood forward and took off the veil she had been using to cover her face outside of Karine or Cassandra's place. Her appearance was revealed, and she bowed lowly, acting docile for once. "She is my younger sister, Your Highness," explained Cassandra. "We reunited not too long ago. I invited her as my guest," added Karine. "Oh, is that so?" started the emperor, but Vrihan interrupted him. "Guest or not, Father, no one in the Dragon Empire is allowed to defy a dragon's family member. Those who do should be punished, regardless of their rank. Wasn't my sister just punished for insulting the concubine? Why should the concubine's sister get away with insulting my sister then?" Cassandra was going whiter with each word. No matter what, she didn't want Vrihan anywhere near her sister, or able to do anything to her. She couldn't stand that man, his rat face, and his cunning words. Karan moved his position, putting himself between Cassandra and Vrihan, and Kray's anger was now directed at the second prince. However, it was clear that the dragon wouldn't be able to injure him in any way from that position, and so, the second prince ignored it completely. Vrihan kept his eyes on his father, with an accusatory stance. "Are you going to let everything go my brother's way, Father? If you are so tired of seeing us fighting, how about showing some equality for once? That favoritism of yours for the concubine has to stop, Father." The emperor had no answer to that, and for once, Karine and Sherian had nothing to retort, either. It only worried Cassandra more. She had to hold on to Karen's arm so as not to fall, as her heart was going crazy. After a long while, the emperor, who seemed hesitant, eventually sighed and nodded. That's right. I need to go by the rules. Sorry, my white lily, but Vrihan is right, I cannot let it go so easily. A punishment seems befitting of the situation. May I suggest, father, said Vrihan. Whatever he was about to say, Cassandra knew she wasn't going to like it. Something in that horrid face of his told her he was about to come up with something she didn't want to hear. I think being whipped for, let's say 506 times should do it. 506? Why would you come with such a ridiculous number, said the emperor. Miss Andra was appalled, but Cassandra was even worse. She knew what that number was for. It was the number of times Fetra had whipped the concubine she had tried to defend, months ago. She realized Vrihan was doing all of this on purpose. While pretending he didn't hold it against them, he was clearly getting revenge for his sister. He was just not letting his emotions show at all, so as to not seem revengeful. Father! This is too much, said Sherian, furious. Will you stop yelling? I'm thinking, replied the emperor, annoyed. Cassandra's heart was beating like crazy. He couldn't agree to that. If Miss Andra was whipped 500 times, she would die for sure. She exchanged worried glances with Karine, but there wasn't much the imperial concubine could do at this point. With Vrihan's words about the favoritism they already benefited from earlier, she couldn't say anything. After a while, the emperor nodded. All right, we will do this. The young servant will be whipped 100 times. That will be enough. Your Highness, screamed Cassandra, on the verge of tears. She couldn't believe it. Miss Andra would have to suffer the whip 100 times. She didn't even want them to touch a hair on her sister's head. She almost collapsed, but Karen grabbed her before that, holding her. Enough, enough, said the emperor, leaving the room. As the emperor left, Vrihan was staring at Cassandra. He didn't seem happy or unhappy, his expression was indecipherable, aside from his eyes as cold as ice. 100 times, cried Cassandra. Highness, don't worry, said Miss Andra, running to her side. I can stand it. Don't worry, please, please. Don't cry. I did this to myself, Cassandra. Lady Karine was right, I've been getting ahead of myself, this is my punishment. Don't cry, please. However, Cassandra's tears wouldn't stop. She felt horribly guilty for all this. Miss Andra had only tried to defend her, and now she was being punished. Her younger sister had never been whipped in her life. Karine came to her side, too, rubbing her back and consoling her. Don't worry, dear, it will be all right. His Highness won't allow them to go too hard on her. Meanwhile, Sherian was still standing, on the side, glaring at Vrihan along with Cray. The dragon was still growling at the second prince from earlier, even more frustrated to not be able to attack him. Are you satisfied, now? Hissed Sherian. Go and scrape up whatever is left of your sister. Vrihan stayed silent for a while and actually left the room without saying a word. Sherian clicked her tongue. As they were left alone in the imperial chamber, Karine insisted that they go back. Cassandra didn't want to return to her apartments, so they headed once again to the imperial concubine's apartments. Miss Andra felt more sorry for her sister than she actually was for herself. She had caused this, and now Cassandra was worried sick for her. She couldn't even stand by herself, her prince had to carry her all the way back. She understood that she had to go through this, and how light the emperor's punishment for her really was. Neither Corinne or her children had looked at her since it had been announced. When they returned to Corinne's garden, Cassandra had stopped crying, but she was still devastated about what her sister would have to go through. Karen gently put her in the chair, and Miss Andra immediately sat on the grass next to her, taking her hand. "Highness, please, don't worry, okay? You've suffered so much more than me already, I can stand this much, trust me." No matter if she could stand it, Cassandra was already sick at the simple thought of her younger sister, her flesh and blood, being injured. A servant came running, bowing politely. "Your Highnesses, Imperial Concubine Corinne, Concubine Cassandra, my greetings. His Highness the Emperor has ordered for the servant lady Miss Andra to be brought to the punishment cell for her sentence." Cassandra almost broke down in tears again, but Miss Andra confidently stood with a resolute look. "I'm coming," she announced, determined. "I'm coming with you," said Cassandra. "Certainly not," roared Corinne. "You are already sick enough, you are not going to watch that, too." "I don't want to leave her alone through this," she insisted. "I will go with her, Cassie," sighed Sherian. "Don't worry. They won't dare go too hard on her if I am there. I promise, I will bring her back as soon as it's over. Just stay here with Mother and Karen." Cassandra wanted to protest, but no one would side with her. On the side, even Dahlia silently cried too, feeling sorry for Miss Andra. She internally regretted she hadn't been braver earlier and said something to stop her or the princess before things escalated. Cassandra stood and hugged Miss Andra, holding back her tears. "Don't grind your teeth, and don't get tense," she said. "It'll only make it worse. Take deep breaths, and I'll heal you when you come back. I promise." "I know. My sister is the best healer in the world." Despite her confident smile, everyone could tell Miss Andra was just trying hard not to break down and cause her sister more pain. After a while, they let go of each other, and Cassandra stumbled back. Karen helped her to sit back in the chair. Miss Andra gave her a weak smile and turned to the servant and Sherian. "I'm ready. Let's go." Chapter 14. As soon as Miss Andra was gone, Cassandra couldn't help but cry again. Dahlia tried to get some herbal tea prepared for her, but she didn't touch it and only sobbed in the war god's arms for a long time. It was the first time Cassandra had felt so powerless and defeated. She could stand being injured herself, but seeing her loved ones being injured was the worst thing possible for her. She hated having to wait for her sister to come back after her punishment. She wouldn't be able to do anything for her until then. Karen didn't say anything. He wasn't good at comforting her, aside from holding her in his arms, and caressing her hair. His physical contact was the only thing seemingly able to comfort Cassandra a bit, as she stayed curled up in his arms for a long time. Even Cray had arrived in the garden, growling so softly it was almost a whistle, putting its head next to Cassandra, looking sorry for her. Corinne couldn't seem to sit still. The imperial concubine paced around, ordering the servants to do useless things. She kept going in and out of the garden, fidgety. Karine was a proud woman and hated being powerless. The young sisters had grown on her, even the belligerent Miss Andra. She felt partially responsible for her punishment too. If she hadn't pushed for her to come with them. No, it wouldn't have changed anything anyway. Vrihan had gotten what he really wanted. To harm Cassandra indirectly, he took aim at the only person he could openly attack in Karen's entourage. She felt even madder thinking about that brat. They needed to be ready in case something else happened, or even better, give him payback. He had probably already got one, though. Though he had been careful not to show it, Fetra was his closest sister, her downfall was probably painful to him as well. Compared to that, the punishment befallen on Miss Andra felt too light, even. "I can't sit still," suddenly declared Cassandra. The young concubine stood up, surprising everyone around. "Lady Cassandra, we should wait for Lady Miss Andra," said Dahlia, worried for her. "No. I'm counting mentally, again and again. If I keep imagining it without doing anything, I'll go crazy. I need to do something. I want to prepare the medicine for when she gets back. I want to go to my garden." "You are not leaving my apartments," roared Karine, wary like a lioness. "Cassandra, you should stay here for now." However, Karen stood next to Cassandra and took her hand. "I will go with her," he declared. Despite his apparent calm, Karine knew her son was probably as frustrated as she was. He hadn't said anything, but seeing Cassandra so sad and miserable probably affected him as well. Cray stood up too, looking curious about the change of situation. The imperial concubine sighed. "Fine. But you two come back here as soon as that ointment is done. Sherian will bring her back here anyway." Cassandra nodded, and left, followed closely by the prince. Karine sighed and sat in the chair she had just left. Cray, who couldn't follow them, growled too and put its head on the imperial concubine's lap. She scratched its snout. "Those children," she sighed. Meanwhile, Cassandra was hurrying back to the prince's apartments. She was aiming right for her herbal garden, still holding Karen's hand. She had nothing else in mind but her sister. She wasn't scared at the moment, just focused. As soon as she got there, she let go of his hand and started gathering everything she needed in a hurry. In a few minutes, she had gathered enough herbs and water, and started working on it at her little table, a determined expression on face. Her eyes were still red, but she didn't care. Karen let her do whatever she wanted. He understood she needed to keep herself busy to forget about all her sadness and frustration. Something else actually caught his attention. One spot of the grass was still humid and muddy, where the girls had fought with Fetra just a couple of hours earlier. He circled the area, and suddenly spotted Fetra's dagger, still lying at the bottom of one of the fountains. With a frown, he took it out, observing it. It was a good weapon, but it hadn't been taken care of properly. For a while, the garden was relatively silent. Cassandra was focused on making the best ointment possible, crushing her herbs into a mortar, adding water, and preparing some kind of green medicinal paste. She then moved on to a second medicine, a painkiller decoction. At the same time, Karen was sitting near her, and had begun sanding and sharpening the dagger. He scraped off all the unnecessary decorations that added to its weight, letting the little diamonds and rubies fall on the grass without a care. After several minutes, Cassandra assembled everything she had prepared in front of her, shaking her head. "I don't know if this will be enough," she said, looking defeated. The prince stood up, and looked at the table. She had made a pitcher full of ointment, and a large glass of medicine, too. It would probably be enough, even for 2 people. "Let's go back," he declared. "Maybe I can make more," she said. "I can find something else to ease the pain, or make it less bitter, or make more of it." "Cassandra, it's enough. Let's go back." "But…" "Enough." She bit her lip, and Karen grabbed her chin to have her finally look at him instead of the medicine. His deep black eyes almost took her by surprise. "It's been over an hour," he said, gently but firmly. "Let's go. Your sister will be back soon." Forced to confront his eyes, Cassandra suddenly felt like crying again. She shook her head, but the tears came anyway. She covered her eyes. I had promised our mother I would protect her. I can't believe. I'm such a bad sister. I shouldn't have brought her here." The prince sighed, and gently had her let go of her tools. He took her into his strong embrace to try and calm her down. It had been a while since she had cried so much. Cassandra had only really cried 3 times since he had met her. The first time was out of fear for him, when he was locked up by his father. The second time, it was out of anger, for the slaves, when the slave traders showed no compassion. Now, she was crying for her younger sister. It seemed like that girl always cried more for others than herself, when she was the one who had been going through so much. Her own scars, from being whipped so many times, added up to much more than 100 or 2. There wasn't a spot on her skin that didn't have one of those white, thin lines he hated. Given that Cassandra's skin was among the whitest possible, the scars were sometimes harder to see, and sometimes very visible, like little silver threads, but Karen felt it under his fingers any time he caressed her. That precious, frail body he adored had been mistreated until it got like this. Her legs, her arms, her back, her chest. There wasn't an area that had been spared. She even had some on the back of her hands, and on her neck, though the spot where she formerly had a collar had been protected by the metal. His blood would boil just thinking about all the pain she had been inflicted. What if she dies? Karen, if something happens to my sister, Cassandra, look at me. She lifted her head. Her eyes, full of tears, were the most dangerous weapon against him. He put his hands around her neck, his fingers in her hair, and gently caressed her cheek with his thumb. Your sister will be fine. As soon as she comes out of there, and can travel, I will send her to the Diamond Palace with my mother. I will get her out of here, and as soon as these celebrations are over, we will, too. It's my promise to you. Cassandra nodded weakly, but her heart wasn't at peace. She felt like she was going to crumble at any moment. Can I be honest for a minute? She said. What is it? I don't want you to be an emperor. Karen wasn't exactly surprised by her words, but it was certainly the first time she said something like that. He frowned, a bit confused. I thought you said. I know what I said, sighed Cassandra, pushing him a bit. There's a part of me, a selfish part of me, that wishes we could leave, just the two of us, and our family. Go far from all the politics, the murders, the plots, and everyone who wants to harm us. I want. If I could live in a dream, it would be anywhere but this empire. I don't want to give birth to children and worry about which ones will be killed. I don't want the jewels, the dresses, the fancy banquets. I just want you, our people, and our baby, living in peace. I want to bear your children, and get old with you. I could hop on Kray's back and let your dragon take us anywhere. But she took a deep breath, calming herself down, closing her eyes. There is also a part of me that wants you to change this empire. I hate this dragon empire, Karen. Everything is wrong with it. I hate how you and your brothers can kill people without remorse. How slaves and servants are treated like disposable livestock. How women are seen as merchandise, even princesses. How you see the destruction of my people as nothing more than some unfortunate event from the past. I was raised with the idea that life and death are sacred, and must be honored. Your people don't care about life, and they don't even respect the dead. Cassandra. She shook her head, asking him to let her speak a bit longer. That day, in the arena, I was ready to die. I didn't care about the Imperial Games. I wasn't scared, I had no more expectations for life. However, of all people, you chose me. The moment when Kray dropped me at your feet, and you put that little piece of your coat on my shoulders, something in me changed a little. Since we met, every day, I have been seeing what a wonderful, loving man you are. You don't care about gender when you interact with people. You respect your siblings based on their skills, not their gender. You kill when you have to, not when you want. You protect those you love, and punish those who deserve to be punished. You are not perfect, but you are the kind of man that could change this empire into a country I can love. The prince was very still, listening to every word. Cassandra's voice was hoarse because of all of her earlier crying, softer and huskier than usual. She was almost whispering. If a man like Vrahan becomes emperor, this will go on. People will die unfairly, women like Miss Andra will be treated poorly. Truth is, if I believed any of your brothers could do this better than you, I would root for them to take the golden throne. But I have seen what they can do, and it isn't what you can do. They can't take an abused, damaged woman, forget about her appearance and still be able to see her value. To turn her into an imperial physician. They can't respect their sisters like their equals. They can't have empathy for slaves, servants, or for their people. They live in golden palaces, while you're fine with eating and sleeping in a camp. You are not like them, my love. This is exactly why you made me fall for you, and why I believe you should be the next emperor, even if it breaks my heart. Karen gently caressed her arm. He understood everything she said, however, there was one thing that was worrying the war god at that moment, and he couldn't not say it. I am not leaving you, he said. Somehow, he felt as if, at one point, all of this was going to be too much for her. That fragile woman, no matter how strong her heart was, would reach her limit, and be unable to follow whichever path he was fated to follow. Karen didn't want that. Of all the things he had ever desired, since the moment he had laid his eyes on her, there wasn't a single one that didn't include Cassandra. "I know," Cassandra chuckled. "I won't leave you either. Your fate will be mine, my prince, I promise. I've come to peace with that already. Don't worry." He sighed, and once again, hugged her closely. Cassandra felt relieved he had understood what had been hidden in her heart for a while now. Even for her, it had been so hard to deal with the whole situation, and to come to terms with what she truly wanted. However, she knew one thing for sure: she wanted to stay by this man's side. She stayed in his embrace for as long as it took for her to calm down. Once her tears were dry, and her heart a bit more at peace, she sighed and took a step back with a chuckle. "I really want to see our son soon." Karen nodded, caressing her tummy. "Let's have many children," he said. "Why many? You look better when you're pregnant." Cassandra chuckled, amused. She knew what he meant, but his way with words was really too much. She softly kissed him. "I won't suddenly go back to being skinny after our son is born, Karen. But I am fine with having many. I would love a big family." She took a deep breath, feeling a bit better, and turned to her little table. "All right, time to go back." The prince nodded and helped her take the medicine back to Kareen's apartments. Kareen and Kray were still in the same position, Dahlia standing a few steps behind, but strangely, Missandra and Sherian hadn't come back yet. Cassandra put her medicine down on a little table the imperial concubine had in the garden, and sat, worried. It only took a few seconds, though. Suddenly they heard a commotion from the entrance of the garden. The servants went rushing, and Cassandra stood up. Sherian was carrying Missandra on her back. When she gently put her down on the chair, it was obvious the young girl had cried a lot. She looked exhausted, and the back of her dress was ripped open. Cassandra did her best not to cry again. Her younger sister's hair had been put to the side in a braid, so the first thing Cassandra saw was her back, covered in cuts, some deep and still bleeding fresh blood. As if it kept her from breaking down, Cassandra immediately ordered for her sister to be taken to a bedroom, and made to lay down so she could treat her. Before the servants even had a chance to move, Karen gently lifted Missandra and carried her himself, followed by the little group. "Your sister was brave. She didn't even scream or beg. She endured it until it was over." I'm fine," Missandra said. Her voice was so weak, she could pass out at any moment. Cassandra gently helped her take little sips of the medicinal water that could ease her pain, and kissed her cheek once she had drunk it all. "It's okay if you want to close your eyes, Linyu. I will treat you," she whispered. "How did you endure all that?" But before she could end her sentence, Missandra's tired eyes closed themselves, and she passed out, exhausted. Cassandra sighed, but it was half of a cry. She grabbed the towel that a servant had just brought, damped it in the clear water and started cleaning her sister's injuries. The servant girl stepped forward, wanting to clean Missandra's injuries instead of letting the concubine dirty herself, but Karen glared at her. "Get out!" All of the servants cleared the room in a couple of seconds. Karine sighed, caressing Miss Sandra's head and hair gently. Poor thing. Sherian nodded. She had been truly impressed with the younger sister that day. Her resilience to take the pain without complaining had been admirable. Most people would openly scream and beg for mercy, but Miss Andra had done none of that. She had closed her eyes and muttered things silently, waiting for it to be over with. Once the injuries were cleaned, Cassandra suddenly took a strand of her sister's hair, and started sewing her deepest and largest cuts, patiently. Karine frowned. With her hair, the body recognizes its own, whispered Cassandra. It lessens the risks of infection. It was a technique she hadn't been able to use in the army, since the men's hair was cut short, but Miss Sandra's hair was long and clean enough to be used to sew her injuries. With determination, Cassandra sewed each injury one by one. She was singing something softly, in their mother tongue, probably to soothe her sister. That song. Miss Andra was mumbling the same thing the whole time, said Sherian. It's the water god's prayer. It's a very sad song. She kept singing, softly, while applying the ointment on her sister's superficial injuries. At some point, she sang it again, in the Dragon Empire's language this time, for them to understand it too. O God of water! Will you hear this prayer? Will you hear your children when they die under the sun? O God of water! Will you hear and remember the prayer of your daughters? For they cried alone. O God of water! All your people's tears. Shall you ever hear? Please cry for us. O God of water! If your children are gone, please take them home. For you loved us. O God of water! When I rest in your embrace, please help me brace the last river. O Father of water! Let me dive and sleep. Won't you cry and weep? For you loved us. O beloved Father! Please cry for my sisters. Please cry for your daughters. For you loved us. For you loved us. When she was done, both singing and putting on the medicine, she took a long sigh, watching Miss Sandra's resting figure. Her sister had aged a few years in just a couple of hours. It's the saddest I've ever heard, said Sherian. Our elders sang it in times of pain and grief. Our legend said it was the last song of the last mermaids, sung before their death. It was a requiem. Our people made it a prayer. Do you really descend from mermaids? Asked Sherian curiously. Who knows? A long part of our history was forgotten, the other comes from tales and legends. It's hard to tell how much is true. Cassandra didn't care much for their ancestors' secrets at that moment. She kept staring at her sister, hoping she could heal fast, and feel as little pain as possible. Anyway, with Miss Andra punished, that should settle it for father, said Sherian. Your second brother won't be satisfied with that, retorted her mother. This was only a small payback for how we insulted Fetra. He won't stop there. A servant came earlier to tell me the princess has several bones broken. He will want to pay that back. I'm getting Miss Andra out of here as soon as possible, said Cassandra. I don't want my sister anywhere near where she could be hurt again. Don't worry, we will make sure she can leave quietly. Cassandra stood up, shaking her head. She needs to rest for now. The journey to the Diamond Castle would be too much to handle for her in this state. Hopefully, she will be fine by the end of the celebrations, and we can all leave together. Only 4 days to go, said Karine. Miss Andra won't leave my apartments until then, so she can rest and stay safe. I promise nothing can happen to her here. Cassandra weakly nodded. She didn't feel like going back to the celebrations for the day, anyway. She didn't care what the Emperor would say, she didn't want to indulge a man who had inflicted that to her younger sister, no matter what. Can I dine here tonight? She asked. Of course, Cassie. That old fart won't dare protest if we say you feel unwell. Let's just have you rest here and do a little dinner together, all right? For the rest of the afternoon, Cassandra stayed by her sister's side, with Dahlia. She didn't want to leave her side until she woke up, and everyone understood that. Karen, Cherienne, and their mother gave the sisters some space, finding their own occupations in the palace, though they stayed nearby. At some point around the end of the afternoon, Cassandra needed to use the bathroom. She had stayed next to Miss Andra all this time and couldn't take it anymore. She left Dahlia to watch her in her stead, and went to the closest bathroom. Karine's apartments were vast, and among the prettiest in the palace. There were many rooms for her to use, though she only seemed to use a few. Cassandra hadn't gotten accustomed to the place yet. She was used to the Diamond Palace, but inside the palace, a lot of corridors and doors looked the same. Somehow, she got lost on her way back to the room Miss Andra had been taken to. She might have taken a wrong turn somewhere, because, after a few minutes, she still wasn't back. She knew she was still inside the imperial concubine's apartments, she just had no idea where. There was something strange in this area. Actually, she had thought about asking a servant for the way back, but this corridor was completely deserted. Cassandra was lost. This part of the palace looked abandoned, nothing like Karine's rooms full of plants and life. In here, there was a deadly silence floating around, like a cathedral. As she was trying to figure the way back, she came across what might have been a dining room, long ago. It was all dusty, and less refined than the one they actually used. Some cutlery had been forgotten in an old buffet, along with spider webs and dust. Cassandra frowned. She didn't understand why Karine, who loved clean and decorated spaces, would leave a wing of her apartments empty like this. She kept walking until she found another corridor with rooms. All the doors looked alike, but one caught her attention. It was torn down. Not like it had crumbled naturally, but like some beast had attacked it. The room was open, and, pushed by curiosity, she stepped in. It was a child's room. There was a bed a bit smaller than the norm, some old furniture, and toys. She collected one that looked like a dragon plushie, left on the floor. It was cute, but old. Whose room was this? There was such a nostalgic feeling hanging in the air. Something deeply sad, too. Cassandra glanced around. There were toy blades, 3 of them, on top of a chest. So it was probably a boy's room. The desk still had some old books piled up, collecting dust. The library next to it as well. A bit further, something like a large couch made of straw was in a corner, a shape still visible in its center. Was it for some pet to sleep in? A dog, or Cassandra. She jumped and turned around. Karen was standing a few steps behind her, outside of the room. She sighed in relief after that scare. Sorry. I got lost. Come. Karen. Whose room is this? The prince hesitated, looking inside the room. He wasn't stepping in, which intrigued Cassandra even more. His eyes fell on the stuffed toy she was holding. It was mine. Cassandra was surprised, though she was suspecting it already. The straw couch's indent was too large and deep for a regular animal. The size of it would be fitting if it was for a dragon. A young dragon. It's your childhood bedroom. He nodded. Was it really? She thought it might have been one of his brothers, but Cassandra couldn't imagine a prince's room would have been left like this, even less if Karine was in charge. Yet it felt completely abandoned, forgotten. However, the way her prince was standing outside, instead of coming to her, intrigued her as well. Something in his attitude didn't feel right, like he was wary of the room. He loathed this place. She could tell just by looking at him. He had the same look as when he was glaring at Vrihan, or the women who had tried to approach him before. Something about that place disgusted him. Why would he hate his childhood bedroom? It looked like it used to be a warm and nice bedroom for a child to be in. She looked at the damaged door again. Something had happened here. As if someone had gone berserk on it. She turned around and left the room, but she had kept the little dragon toy with her. For some reason, she liked that stuffed toy. It only needed a bit of cleaning and sewing. As soon as she was next to him, Karen put an arm around her waist and held her close. He was still glaring at the abandoned room. Let's go, he said. He gently kissed her forehead, and Cassandra nodded. Somehow, she felt like she shouldn't ask about that room now. He obviously didn't want to talk about it, and she didn't want to push him to. They walked back together, the prince guiding her silently to Miss Sandra's room. Her sister was still asleep when they got there, and Cassandra, worried, checked her temperature. She frowned, her hand on her sister's forehead. She has a bit of a fever. I hoped she wouldn't. Despite her worry, Karine had already ordered some fever medicine to be prepared, just in case. Cassandra had nothing to say against it, so she gave it to her sister, once she was sure it had been tested, and let Miss Andra rest again. Son, your dragon is making a fuss in my garden, said Karine. The prince went out to go and handle an impatient cray. The dragon had been waiting in the garden all afternoon for Cassandra, and was getting impatient and grumpy. The young concubine sighed. I'm so thankful to you, Lady Karine. If it wasn't for your help. Don't say such things. Of course. When an old woman like me can help, she will. There is nothing I wouldn't do to protect my children. Cassandra blushed a bit, honored to hear the imperial concubine speak about her like so. She already knew Karine was fond of her, regardless of Karen's relationship with her, but this was the first time she referred to her like she was her own daughter. For an orphan like Cassandra, this was probably the nicest thing Karine could have told her. Lady Karine, earlier. I got a bit lost and ended up in an abandoned L, she whispered, hoping Karine would understand. I know, sighed the imperial concubine. My son has had that upset expression since earlier, and that toy. Did he say anything? Cassandra looked down at the dragon plushie, and shook her head. No. I didn't ask either. Karine nodded sadly. It's good that you didn't, Cassandra. Men are men, they do not like to show their weakness and they do not share their secrets easily. Even the war god. Give him time. He will talk when he is ready. Cassandra understood. She wasn't curious enough to pry into someone's past. She felt that whatever it was about, it was something Karen wouldn't share easily, either. Something dark and painful happened to the war god. The two women discussed Miss Sandra's health a bit longer, but when it became clear that the young woman wouldn't wake up for a while after taking the fever medicine, Cassandra finally agreed to leave her for a bit. In the garden, the sun was setting, and Karine's servants had prepared a little space for them to have a cozy dinner outside. The black dragon almost jumped on Cassandra upon seeing her, dangerously wagging its tail around and growling happily. Thankfully, the garden was large enough for the dragon to move around, or else it would have been a disaster. To her surprise, the dragon seemed curious about the toy, too. Cray kept sniffing it, and Cassandra wondered if he could remember it somehow. She turned to Dahlia. Could you get me a washing basin? And a sewing kit, too. I can do it for you, Lady Cassandra. No, thank you, Dahlia, I would like to do it myself. I understand. I will go get it then. Cassandra thanked her and went to sit next to Karine on the large rug on the grass. There was a whole buffet waiting for them, their own little celebration. Karen and his sister joined them right after, too. The war god sat behind Cassandra, wrapping her in his arms, while Sherian laid down. So, what's the plan? Asked Sherian, grabbing a cheese cube. There is no plan for now, replied her mother. We will treat Miss Andra, and as soon as the celebrations are over, we are flying back to my palace. I want to see Srai, too. Cassandra had almost forgotten about the little dragon. He probably missed his mom. Their baby's egg was still in the Diamond Palace, too. Karine had it safely guarded back there, and Cassandra trusted her fully with it. Cassandra wondered what color the baby dragon would be. Oh, I'm bored, sighed Sherian. Brother, come and spar with me. Like old times. Karen frowned, but eventually got up. He and his sister drew out their swords and started dueling together. Cassandra wasn't very worried. Those two were on the same level, and wouldn't get too serious in front of their mother. Meanwhile, Cray saw an opportunity and swiftly trotted to take Karen's spot behind Cassandra. Its large and long body actually allowed it to be circled around Karine, too, making the dragon all the happier. It rested its head on Cassandra's lap, while the imperial concubine laid her back against its body, used to this behavior. The two women watched the siblings spar for a while. Dahlia had brought what she had asked for, so Cassandra slowly started working on improving the little dragon plushie's condition while watching the duel. Cassandra was truly impressed at Sherian's strength. Not only was the princess extraordinarily strong, but she also didn't have any issue fighting on equal terms with her brother, the war god. She was using two swords, and a perfectly balanced style, so elegant it almost seemed like a dance. Those two, sighed Karine. I should have bought them dolls when they were kids. Cassandra chuckled, remembering the many toy swords she had seen. They may have not all belonged to Karen, after all. Cherienne was a bit of a tomboy, it seems. What kind of children were they? Cassandra asked, still focused on her sewing. Exactly like now, sighed the imperial concubine. Karen was silent and grumpy, Cherienne was loud and grumpy. Those two little brats had such tempers. I only seldom brought them here. It was such a ruckus every time we came. Not only did they always spar between themselves like this, but they caused fights absolutely everywhere. Cray, too. With their siblings? Asked Cassandra, glancing at the dragon who was sleeping, or pretending to. With their siblings, with their father's concubines. Cherienne once broke all of one of her sister's fingers because she had insulted me. Most concubines can't scold imperial children unless they are their own, but with those two? Ah! I never had to raise my voice once, they'd always take care of any problem before I did. Cassandra had never imagined those two were once so protective of their mother. She could still remember how they weren't thrilled about visiting her when she got hold of Cray's egg. Karine probably didn't let herself be bullied, either. They definitely inherited a lot of their mother's traits, especially Cherienne. Lady Karine, pardon me for asking this, but why didn't you marry the Emperor? You've been his favorite since, long ago. Karine sighed, sliding her finger on her wine cup. That old man. He did propose a few times. However, every time we got close to an engagement, something happened. I almost died or lost one of my children. Jealousy won over everything, I suppose. He already had too many women before me, and I realized that marrying him meant my children would be in more danger than ever. I couldn't forgive that. Especially the idea that I would have to live in the same place as my children's assassins. We didn't find who had done it. So, I decided to isolate myself, and focus on raising those two. That's when he gifted me the Diamond City and Palace. It was an apology for being useless in finding our children's murderer. I was devastated then, and became paranoid over protecting those two. I left the palace. Since I ignored him, he got other concubines, other children. Time passed. I thought the Diamond Palace was a present for Karen's birth. That's what I told them. Trust me, a mother will find many lies to hide from her children, exactly how ugly the price for their survival was. Cassandra felt a bit sorry for Karine. She had met the Emperor too late, and gotten involved in the cruel games of the Imperial Palace. She put a protective hand on her tummy. Maybe, in other circumstances, she would have made the same choices as her. Now that she was expecting, her instincts were all about this baby's protection. Her refusal to marry Karen for the time being had to do with that too. Though she was only willing to wait. She still held on to that idea of becoming his one and only woman, when they would be in a safer place. Talk about the dragon, and he will show his tail, said Karine. Cassandra lifted her head, and so did Cray, who growled immediately. To their surprise, Claude was flying high above them, making circles in the sky and seeming hesitant to come down. Its golden scales were almost blinding with the sun's reflection in it. The imperial concubine clicked her tongue. Looks like he didn't appreciate me not coming to his celebrations. Well, suits him. He can send his dragon, I don't care. Cassandra kept staring at Glahad. Did the Emperor send his dragon to spy on them? She couldn't help but feel a bit sorry for it. The golden dragon probably didn't dare approach, and was only sent to check on their beloved. Cray kept growling in warning, though the black dragon would probably have lost a fight against Glahad. Hey! Meanwhile, on the grass Sherian had just gotten an injury. Probably unfocused because of Glahad, the sister had just received a large cut on her arm. She frowned, staring at it. To Cassandra's surprise, scales immediately appeared on her dark skin to cover it up, just like Karen's injuries. Sherian's scales were more of dark indigo than black, though. She can do that too, said Cassandra, surprised. Of course. My daughter has dragon blood too, after all. Sherian, who had heard them, rolled her eyes. Really, Cassie, you underestimate me that much. With a little laugh, she suddenly seemed like she was inhaling a lot of air, and, turning towards the area Glahad was flying in, Sherian suddenly exhaled a fireball. Cassandra jumped in surprise, while the large golden dragon, though it hadn't been hit, growled, annoyed. Sherian's flames had died in the air, way before they reached Glahad, who was flying too high. Yet, it was so impressive. The young concubine was both impressed and frightened. I had no idea the princesses could do such a thing. Not all the princesses, sweetie, replied Sherian with an arrogant look. It takes talent. What talent? Retorted her mother. It's just like how your brother is so good at taming his dragon. It has nothing to do with talent. Do you mean it's also about their characters? Asked Cassandra. She had slowly started to understand the bond between a prince and his dragon. The more true they were to themselves, the more their own dragons were tamed. Compared to Karen, who never hid his emotions and acted as he wished, someone like Vrihan was unable to tame his dragon. His cunning nature and how he always hid his real thoughts were what kept his dragon wild. Had the red dragon been able to roam freely, it would have probably gone straight to kill its enemies in a rage. Cray, however, was free to act. The dragon could kill, growl, and attack who Karen hated, except for the imperial family. It was free to express its love for Cassandra, too, making it easier to tame than any of its peers. Cassandra wondered if the red dragon had no one to show love to. Sherian is more gifted than any of her sisters. Only a handful of princesses can do the dragon's breath, or have the dragon skin. I thought it was mostly about blood. It's a bit more complicated than that, said Karine. The princes are born separately from their dragons. The emperor's daughters, however, are half-dragons themselves. There is a theory that they are too weak for an actual dragon to be born, so instead, it grows in them. Cassandra was astonished. Didn't that mean the princess's potential was almost unlimited? They may not have dragons, but judging from Sherian's skills, they may not even need to have one. Moreover, her injury was healing even faster than Karen's. What else was the princess able to do? Doesn't that mean Fetra will be healed soon? She asked, suddenly remembering about the other matter. That. I'm waiting to see, said Karine with an enigmatic smile. Cassandra wondered what Karine had in mind about Fetra. Somehow, she felt like something bigger was at stake. The siblings resumed their sparring, but Sherian and Karen were obviously of equal strength. It could take a while, and even Glahad eventually left the skies above them, flying away. Cassandra sighed and caressed Kray's warm scales. The dragon had gone back to its nap as soon as the older dragon was gone. As they kept dining, some imperial servants came twice to invite Karine and the siblings to the celebrations, but the imperial concubine stubbornly ignored them. When another servant showed up, she frowned. "Didn't I say no twice already? How many times do I need to get mad for that old dragon to give up?" "My apologies, imperial concubine," said the poor servant. "I am only here to deliver a letter to the third prince's concubine." Cassandra got up to receive the letter, surprised. It came from the outside, and she suddenly understood. It was the intel Miss Andra had tried to gather about the abortion potion. She quickly sent the servant away, and opened it to read it quickly. A friend of Miss Andra from the Red District had apparently asked around, and it turned out, the order was made from the Imperial Palace indeed. "It says someone from the Red Wind Pavilion made the order," read Cassandra, confused. Karine sneered. "That's Vrihan's dead mother's pavilion." With this, the person who ordered the potion is obvious. It was probably Fetra. She is the one in charge of that place. Fetra? Why would Princess Fetra order an abortion potion? If it wasn't to be used against me, then who? "Maybe that was enough to get pregnant," muttered Sherian. The siblings walked back to join the dinner, ending their duel after over an hour. "I don't think that princess was pregnant." They all turned around, surprised to see Miss Andra. The young woman was standing, looking a bit tired. Cassandra jumped on her feet, almost falling over Kray's large head. "Miss Andra! Why aren't you in bed? I thought you would be sleeping. Their fever medicine is crappy. I needed some fresh air, too." With Dahlia and Cassandra's help, Miss Andra sat next to them, grimacing with each movement she had to make using her back. Cassandra helped her drink some fresh water, but surprisingly, she seemed fine. "Ah! The fresh air feels so good. Eat, child, you need to regain your strength," said Karine, putting one of the plates before Miss Andra. "How would you know if Fetra is pregnant or not? I'm good at that. Back when I was in the Red District, I could tell who got pregnant after only a couple of weeks. All the girls came to me to get my abortion medicine, too, so I got used to finding out who was pregnant." "That princess is definitely not pregnant." Karine nodded, though she still looked doubtful. Karen and Sherian walked back to their side, too. Karen, for once, let his dragon keep its spot behind Cassandra, probably so as to not scare Miss Andra. She was already looking uneasy with the dragon's head only a few steps away from her. Sherian, next to their mother, grabbed some wine and shook her head. "I don't like that. I wish we knew who that potion was for. Can it be one of the other concubines? Aside from you, I don't see who it could be. Lefis has pregnant concubines that we know of, but he's too dumb for our father to ever consider him as an heir. No, my gut's telling me it has to be for one of the princesses." I don't think I've seen anyone wearing purple that was pregnant the other night, said Miss Andra. But I'm not 100% accurate. Not all the princesses were there anyway, said Karine. A lot of them try to be forgotten so that no one will ask the emperor to marry them. They'd rather remain single than be forced to leave the palace. Will Fetra have to leave if she gets married? Asked Cassandra. That's the whole point. Once we get married, imperial princesses like me lose most of our status. We can still wear the imperial purple, but aside from throwing tantrums and making the husband kneel, it's not that great. Father doesn't care much about anything outside of the palace. It's less trouble for him if he has less whiny children to handle. Hence, most of the time, our sisters make sure to live their lives quietly. Or they work hard to help their brother get the throne. Cassandra suddenly understood why Cherienne, despite being over 30 years old, was still single and living in the palace. If she had been married off, it would have been one less ally for Karen in the race to the Golden Throne. Indirectly, not marrying off Cherienne was a way to show the emperor's favoritism once again. Without Karen born a few years after her, Cherienne would probably have led a very different life. Once again, Cassandra thought the princesses were very unlucky. Their destiny was closely tied to having a brother or not, and that brother's actions. How many sisters does Vrihan have? Suddenly asked Cassandra, curious. Only 3 from the same mother. The oldest is already married. Fetra is the second sister, and they have a younger one. Oh, what was her name again? Asks Cherienne, frowning. We rarely see that child, I almost forgot about her. Femera, replied Karine. She must be around Miss Sandra's age now. She rarely goes out though, I think Fetra and Vrihan keep her from attending any banquets. Cassandra frowned. It seemed strange that they would hide their younger sister. Perhaps it's to protect her? Or to keep her from spilling their secrets? Could she be the pregnant one? Both Cherienne and Karine stared at her, confused. Femera rarely goes out, repeated Karine. That child is so fragile, I heard she has to stay in bed all day. She probably never even gets a chance to see any man. Cassandra nodded. So, who then? Another concubine whose pregnancy could have been a threat to Vrihan? I wish Fetra was the one pregnant, sneered Cherienne. That would make an excuse for father to repudiate that vermin. He already said he will marry her off. What more do you expect? Also, don't wish for a pregnant woman to be in that state. Even if she's a snake, her child would have nothing to do with it. Watch your words, Cherienne. No, actually, eat and shut it. After that, the princess sulked, and it appeared the topic was over. In the end, they still had no idea who the abortion potion could have been destined for. Without any definite answer, the conversation would only keep going in circles. At least, they were sure of who had ordered it, but the culprit was now locked up in the imperial prison with several fractures and no reason to answer them. Cassandra felt like they were missing something, though. It was odd that Fetra would go out of her way to get that abortion potion. She hated not knowing who the victim should have been. It felt like another threat was hanging above her head with that unsolved question. Thankfully, Cassandra could soon forget about that matter. As they were having a quiet dinner, Karine had fun entertaining them with many rumors about the other concubines from back when she was in the palace and the many stories she had witnessed. Between the feuds amongst the concubines and her own adventures, she had enough stories to write a full book. To Cassandra's surprise, she and Miss Andra had a lot of fun exchanging about their favorite tricks to piss off their rival concubines or prostitutes. The imperial concubine wasn't afraid to talk about some very crude topics, and Cassandra was the one, several times, to blush and try to change the topic a bit, much to Cherienne's amusement. Somehow, it also became obvious that Miss Andra had taken in the lesson about her attitude with the imperial family. Even if it was only the 5 of them, plus Dahlia chuckling on the side, Miss Andra was very careful with her words, and absolutely avoided showing any disrespect for the imperial family. Cassandra thought it was a topic they would have to discuss sooner or later, but at least, it seemed her younger sister had finally understood that her words, if said at the wrong time and place, could have her killed. It appeared that the Dragon Empire's fever medicine wasn't so bad, only late to take effect. Miss Andra started dozing off at the end of their dinner and had to be taken back to her bed, half asleep, to finally finish her night properly. Cassandra stayed a while looking at her younger sister's tired face, unsure. Somehow, she wondered if Fetra was like her, trying to protect her younger sister from all of the palace's schemes. Sturdy arms appeared from behind to embrace her gently. "You should go to sleep, too. If we skip the celebrations, we might as well rest early," she nodded. Karen gently guided her to their room. For that night, another bedroom had been prepared for them to sleep inside Karine's apartments. Somehow, Cassandra didn't feel safe going back to their bedroom after what had happened in her garden. As she laid alongside her prince, tired, it still took her a long while to fall asleep. Her thoughts kept going in circles over all of the events of that day, the unsolved questions she still had, and the threat of Fetra and Vrihan's vengeance. Somehow, she felt like Fetra's punishment had triggered something much more worrisome. Cassandra finally fell asleep as the fireworks started outside. The thumps of her prince's heart against her back echoed with the celebrations, finally soothing her to sleep. "Your Highness! Your Highness!" Cassandra frowned, waking up from all the ruckuses. Next to her, Karen was just sitting up too, with an annoyed expression. What was going on for them to be woken up so early? She could hear several servants outside, desperate to get their attention. She had a bad feeling about this. What could it be? They wouldn't have dared to wake up the prince in the middle of the night if it wasn't urgent. Karen left the bed, grabbing his sword as a reflex, and Cassandra took her night robe to cover herself up too, following him to the door. As they opened it, a handful of imperial servants bowed. "Our apologies for waking the third prince and his lady concubine at such an hour. His Highness the Emperor is requesting your presence immediately." "Cassandra too." The servants exchanged glances, apparently unsure of what to answer. His Highness the Emperor only asked for you and Her Highness Princess Cherienne to come at once, Your Highness." "Cherienne too?" Karen frowned and turned to her, as Cassandra was starting to really worry. What could have happened for them both to be called by the Emperor? Did it have to do with Vrihan, or Fetra? Had something big happened during the night? Karen clicked his tongue and turned to Cassandra. "Go back to sleep," he said. "I will be back soon." "No, it's all right, I want to come with you. The prince frowned, putting a hand on her shoulder. You need more sleep. I won't be getting any if I don't know what's going on. Instead of staying here and worrying, I would rather come along. Please. The war god frowned, but indeed, it would be unlikely that his concubine would peacefully go back to sleep after she had heard that. She was awake and looking very concerned already. Cassandra rarely fell back to sleep once she was up. He nodded. Fine. They both followed the imperial servants out. They had no more information about what was going on. Sherian met them right outside of her bedroom, in her nightgown as well, looking grumpy with her black hair all over the place. I can't believe they dare to wake us up in the middle of the night, she groaned. Indeed, it was still a couple of hours before dawn, too early for anything else but an emergency of some sort. The siblings didn't exchange another word and followed the imperial servants out. It was a long walk to the emperor's chambers, but Cassandra was impressed by how busy the palace already was. Everywhere they walked, imperial servants were busy working, silently cleaning rooms and preparing for the day. Everything had to look perfect before the members of the imperial family got up. Once they finally arrived, the imperial chamber was still in the dark, only lit by many candle lights. A few people were present. The emperor, in a gold robe, with dark circles under his eyes, was walking in circles in front of his dragon. The man looked older than usual without his usual fancy outfits and jewelry. By his side, two older men in military suits were standing, along with a man in a minister's official blue outfit, and some imperial servants. Ah, Karen, Sherian! Finally, exclaimed the emperor upon seeing the trio. What is it, father? Asked Karen, while his sister yawned loudly next to him. Son, news just came from the border. We are under attack. I can't believe those Republicans have the guts to throw an attack during the celebrations. The Eastern Republic, said Sherian. I thought brother defeated them already. Where did they find the courage to launch a new attack? I don't know, I don't care, sighed the emperor. But they are making a ruckus at our border, and I don't like that. We just got the news. They attacked last night. Anyway, while the northern barbarian tribes are contained, Karen. I shall defend the border, said the war god. Yes, yes. I really don't like this. Losing time over this. So annoying, so annoying. Cassandra's heart tightened. The Eastern Republic's attack made no sense now. That country was much weaker than the Dragon Empire. However, no one in the room seemed to doubt that this attack could be pushed back without trouble. The emperor was more worried about his celebrations being ruined, and for a while, that was all he vented about, while the siblings waited, arms crossed until one of the generals reminded him about the more pressing topic. Oh, whatever. Karen, you can go and lead the army to crush them. Crush them for good, I'm fed up with them. If it wasn't so much workload I would just conquer them and that would be the end of the story. Tisk. Father, what about the northern tribes? Asked Sherian. Even if the barbarians are quiet at the moment, brother can't just pull out his army like that. You can go and replace him, for now. Karen, you can take the imperial army with you, and let Sherian handle the north. 1 or 2 imperial factions should be enough anyway, just go with Cray and handle this quickly. Cassandra was speechless about how this matter was handled. The war god only had to take a dragon, a portion of the imperial army, and that was it. She had known about the strength of the Dragon Empire before, but now, they were talking about the fate of another country as if it was just a small matter to be handled overnight. Let Sherian go to the east, suddenly said Karen. His sister frowned, turning to him. Karen, I'm not the war goddess, she said. What are you? Then, Sherian's eyes fell on Cassandra, and she understood. He didn't want to take his concubine to another battlefield. Sherian rolled her eyes and slapped his arm. Are you a foolish? We will just leave her with Mother. She was supposed to go back to the Diamond Palace with Mother soon anyway. You can just take Cassie back when you're done with that stupid battle. What? Who is going to the Diamond Palace? Suddenly asked the Emperor. Mother wants to go back, said Sherian, her hands on her hips. The Emperor turned white. Why? The celebrations are not even over yet. Why can't that woman stay here for more than a few days? She is so mean to me. She never lets me see her, she even ignores the celebrations. How much more heartless can your mother be? While the Emperor kept rambling and complaining about imperial concubine Karine, Sherian sighed and turned to her brother and Cassandra. Seriously, Karen, don't be a foolish. Cassie will be just fine with Mother, and it's only for a few weeks anyway. A few weeks, repeated Cassandra. From what she had heard until now, it looked like the matter of the Eastern Republic attack would be solved rather quickly, but to think it would last a few weeks. She felt really unsure about being separated from her prince for so long, a second time. It would be just like the first time, when he was locked up here in the Imperial Palace while she stayed back with Karine. Sherian sighed. It's still about moving an army and pushing the enemy out of our territory, sweetie. The trip itself will take a few days to the east, and even if brother has his dragon, the army will need to get there the old way. Karen was still frowning. The third prince didn't like this situation either. Cassandra was upset, though she did her best not to let it show too much. This was so sudden. She didn't think they would have to separate so quickly. The two of them exchanged a long glance. Cassandra's heart was breaking, but she was well aware that this was his duty as a prince. Eventually, she gathered her courage and nodded, gently taking his hand. Karen put his arm around her and kissed her head before turning to the Emperor. Father, give me the command of the Imperial Army. I will leave at dawn. Oh, yes, yes, said the Emperor, interrupted in his rant. Can someone here write this down? Oh, you there, perfect. As of today, yada yada yada, I hereby confer the power to lead the Imperial Army to my son, the third Prince Karen, war god of the Dragon Empire, and Dala. Just leave it, I'll fill in the blanks later for the paperwork. Copy this, I'll make the official announcement later. All right, son, it's done. Karen nodded and turned to Cassandra. I'll take you and my mother back to the Diamond Palace before I leave, he whispered. I understand. Father, are we done here? Asked Sherian, impatient. The Emperor exchanged looks with the two generals, nodding. Yes, daughter of mine, but your mother. By father. Before he could add anything, Karen and Sherian promptly left, pulling Cassandra with them. She could still hear the Emperor's frustrated yells several corridors away. She sighed. I feel a bit sorry for His Highness, she whispered. Don't be, retorted Sherian. Mother is doing this on purpose, anyway. I'm fairly sure her two favorite hobbies are pissing our father off and ignoring him. How are you going to go to the north, Sherian? Asked Cassandra. Without a dragon. Brother and Cray will drop me off halfway. I can ride a horse from there. The northern border isn't a problem for now anyway. For a moment, Cassandra wondered if she shouldn't go to the Onyx Castle. However, she had already entered the second trimester of her pregnancy. In any case, she knew she would be safer by Karin's side, in the Diamond Palace. Moreover, she would be too lonely, waiting in the Onyx Castle without the prince there. The siblings and Cassandra walked back to the Imperial concubine's apartments. Karin had been woken up by the earlier ruckus and was already waiting for them in her garden. Sherian quickly explained the situation, making the Imperial concubine frown more and more as she went on. And that old man is sending you too? What about me? Doesn't that old man have other children to send to the front? Am I his only woman producing warriors? Mother, stop it. You know Karen and I are the best fighters. Sephir will just get killed, and father doesn't want to give Vrihan an opportunity to earn merit. Just let us go without a fuss, you know we love it anyway. A fuss? How are you talking to your mother? I will take you and Cassandra back to the Diamond Palace, said Karen. The Imperial concubine was still sulking and turned her anger to him. Of course, you agreed to it too. What next? How long will I wait to see my children next time? And Cassandra? You better be back before your son is born, Karen. Her son obediently nodded, putting his arms around Cassandra in a possessive stance. She chuckled, trying to be brave. It will be fine, Lady Karin. I didn't want to stay here any longer, anyway. So this is a good opportunity to leave without angering His Highness. Speak for yourself, says Sherian. He was furious about mother leaving. Why would I stay here if my children are elsewhere? Shouted the Imperial concubine. How dare that old man complain? Let's just have breakfast and leave. Cassandra sighed, watching the Imperial concubine angrily walk away, yelling for the breakfast to be served already. Will you be all right? He whispered. Yes. I'm more worried about Miss Andra. I hope she can handle the journey. She will be fine, Sherian replied. Your sister is probably stronger than she looks, she was already fine last night. Cassandra nodded. She was a bit dizzy from all the events in the last hour. They had plans to leave as soon as the celebrations were over anyway, but she didn't think it would all happen in such a rush. Moreover, it meant she would have to say goodbye to Karen, again and soon. Sherian sighed and went to go and calm down their mother, who was already storming left and right, making preparations for their departure. Cassandra watched them argue and go back to another room, fighting over the ruckus. Left alone with Karen in the garden, she turned around, still wrapped in his arms, to face him. When will you leave for real? She asked. I will drop you and mother at the Diamond Palace, and stay until the Imperial Army catches up. Maybe a few days. A week at most. A week. They had a week left together. Cassandra nodded, but her throat was tight, and her heart was so heavy, she almost felt like crying. You won't be in danger, will you? She asked. No. She chuckled. He was so sure. Of course. The invincible war god of the Dragon Empire. Cassandra hugged him, feeling a bit vulnerable at that moment. Karen. If it rains during this next week, let's have our ceremony. Please. We will. Under Karen's impulse, their departure was put in motion quite promptly. None of them had much to take back to the Diamond Palace anyway, so they took their time, decided to have breakfast and let the servants prepare whatever they needed to pack. Once again, they had breakfast in the Imperial Concubine's garden, much to Cray's pleasure, as it could lay next to Cassandra and nap in the rising sunlight. As everyone had been woken up quite abruptly, they somehow agreed to take their time whilst having breakfast. They even waited for Miss Andra to wake up, and Anur showed up before their departure, too. As promised, they were ready to depart soon after dawn. To Cassandra's surprise, the first prince's concubines, who had heard of the news, showed up to bid her goodbye before she left. Cassandra gave them a couple more recommendations about Prince Zephyr's health and politely said goodbye. Cray seemed ready for this flight, stretching its wings and walking around in the garden, a bit impatient. To everyone's surprise, Rune, Anur's green dragon, actually showed up too. I'll accompany you, said the young prince. This way, I can take Sherian straight to the northern border and save you some time. I want to go help her at the border, too. The Imperial Palace is so boring. Fine, said Karen, with a pout. Aren't you two just in a hurry to leave me to go play with swords? After that, she got on Cray's back, as if it was her dragon. Cassandra wondered what a young Karen handling baby Cray would have been like. The black dragon always seemed happy to see the Imperial concubine, growling softly at her the same way it did to Cassandra. She secretly wished her own son's dragon would have a similar attitude with her, even when she would be old. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.